Let's work now on class discussion 2. These are the properties of real numbers and equations. So I've divided this into two columns here. So one is the properties of real numbers and the other one will be properties of equality. So let's work now on the properties of real numbers. So the first one is commutative property for real numbers. Now this one, if you remember your do now, this is actually switching places of the numbers. It doesn't matter for addition and multiplication. Just like, for example, if I have here 3 plus 5 is the same as 5 plus 3. And this one is also true for multiplication. So this is 3 times 5 is also the same as 5 times 3. And how to justify that this one is actually a correct statement is finding their numerical values. Besides, 3 plus 5 is equal to 8 and 5 plus 3 is also equal to 8. Okay, and this one is also true for multiplication. 3 times 5 is equal to 15 and 5 times 3 is also equal to 15. And that is what we call commutative property. Associative property is telling us that when you are adding or multiplying more than two numbers, you can either add the first two numbers or add the last two numbers following the properties for simplifying numbers using the PEMDAS. So just like, for example, if you have here 2 plus 3 plus 5, that would be the same as, should be equal to 2 plus 3 plus 5. So here you can either add the first two numbers or add the last two numbers. And that one is also true for multiplication. If you have 2 times 3 times 5, you have 2 times 3 times 5. You either multiply the first two numbers or multiply the last two numbers. And that is what we call associative property. Distributive property is very common. And you have here 2 times 3 plus 4. That is the same as you're multiplying this one. You have 2 times 3 plus 2 times 4. So that is what we call the distributive property. The identity element, we have an identity element for each operation. For addition, we would say the identity element is equal to 0. And the identity element for multiplication is 1. What this identity means is that for addition, if you add 0 to any number, it gives you the same number. Like 5 plus 0 is equal to 5. Because 0 is an identity element for addition. And for multiplication, it means that when you multiply 1 to any number, it gives you the same number. So 5 times 1 is just equal to 5. And then we have the additive inverse. So additive inverse means when you add its opposites, it gives you its identity, which is actually 0. So you have 5. The additive inverse of 5 is negative 5. When you add them, so this one gives you equal to 0. And the multiplicative inverse, when you multiply them, it gives you the identity element. So if you have 5, the multiplicative inverse is 1 over 5. And when you multiply them, that should be equal to 1. And these are the basic properties for real numbers. Now let's have now the properties of equality. Adding the same number to each side of an equation produces an equivalent equation. So we call that one as an addition property of equality. We have here A is equal to B And if you add a number on both sides, you have a plus something, you have b plus something, and provided it should be the same number, so I will say I add c on both sides. Still the two inequality would be, it will still be equal. We call that one as the addition property of equality. The subtraction property of equality is that if you have here a number that are equal, you subtract. We call this one subtraction property of equality. So a minus something, and you have here b minus something. Provided you are subtracting the same number, then they remain equal. In the multiplication property is that if you are multiplying the same number on both sides of the equation, it produces an equivalent equation. So we have here a is equal to b. I'm multiplying this one by the same number. We have b times, okay, multiplying this by c, and this one would remain equal. So this one will still be equal. So this one will still be equal, this one will still be equal. And this one is also true for division. So if you have here two numbers that are equal, so a is equal to b, when you divide this one, so you have a divided by something and b divided by something. So divide this by c, divide this by c, and this one would remain equal. And this one are the basic properties of equality. Division, because you divide both sides. Multiplication, because you multiply on both sides. Subtraction property, because you subtract on both sides of the equality. That's it.